Hello and welcome to the podcast that is loving the resurgence of long throw goals. It's the big man up top.
It certainly is. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm good. Did you see there were 2 goals in the Premier League this weekend from long throws?
You know me, Joe. You know I love a long throw.
It's in your DNA, isn't it?
It's exactly. I can't help but love it. So, bring it on. Bring it on. We are recording this on Monday night because of the bank holiday. We're not in work today, Joe, are we?
We've had an extra day off.
We've had an extra day off, so we're watching the Nottingham Forest Crystal Palace game. Joe, what's the score currently?
It's currently 1-1. There's been a penalty by Eberechi Eze to put Palace in the lead, and then Murillo has equalised for Forest. We're about 67 minutes in. It's all to play for, Ed. And shall I just keep updating you through the episode?
Yeah, please.
Might that be a bit weird listening to this day after the result?
It might be, but it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's fine. What are we going to talk about today, Joe?
Today, Ed, I feel like we're at the point of the season where we're starting to discuss whether teams have had a good year or not. So we are going to have a chat about defining success in football and in life. Does that sound okay?
That sounds fantastic. We're also going to talk a lot about the Championship and the rest of the EFL and, of course, the Premier League as well. So make sure you are listening. But we are going to start, Joe, with Bible Ballers. Are you excited?
We are, yes. Now, I've had a fair amount of stick for last week's question, Ed.
You certainly have. You certainly have. One text that came in from somebody who shall remain anonymous. It came in and said, "What will the question be next week on Bible coaches?" Now, this was in response to your answer for the quiz last week, which was Johnny Heitinger, wasn't it?
I was very careful with my wording. I said that this former player, that was very clear, has represented both Merseyside clubs. Now, I was subject to questioning about the phrase represent, that suggests that they are a player. I believe John Heitinger has represented both Everton and represented Liverpool as a coach this season. I googled the word represent and it says to act on behalf of. I would say John Heitinger this season has acted on behalf of Liverpool. So I'll have no further questioning. Thank you very much.
Well, let's see how you do this week with Bible Ballers. For those of you who've not tuned into the podcast before, this is Guess the Player with a Difference. So I'm going to ask Joe a question. The answer will be a player who will share his first name with the name of a book of the Bible. Are you ready, Joe?
Yeah, go on then.
Which former Wigan and Fulham midfielder, upon signing for Hull City, was presented with a contract containing a misprinted higher salary than originally agreed, which he signed anyway?
So we're probably thinking around maybe like the late noughties. That's when those 3 teams were probably most prominent. I'm going to need a bit more time on this, Ed.
Well, you have a bit more time, Joe. You think about it, and we'll come back to it later in the show. So I think, Joe, we would usually start with the Premier League, but actually, let's be honest, the action has been in the Championship, hasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, the Premier League is really boring now. So let's not bother. Let's go to where the action is, shall we?
I think so. Let's have a look. I think, well, first of all, the big story was Leeds United, wasn't it? It was a straight shootout on the final day between Leeds and Burnley for the title. Leeds went into the day with a pretty much insurmountable goal difference, bar a couple of freak results. So realistically, Leeds knew if they won, they were winning the league. The league was theirs. Burnley needed a win, but they also needed Leeds to slip up. And it just turned out that Leeds were away at almost relegated Plymouth. So it felt like it should have been Leeds' to win. And goodness me, just what a game, Joe. It had everything in terms of, exactly what you thought you wanted to happen. Plymouth taking an early lead through an own goal. Leeds coming back and getting an equaliser. Plymouth parking the bus, so to speak. And I've got to be honest, looking really resilient, looking brave, looking scrappy, looking better than their relegation form suggests. But then in the end, Joe, Leeds getting an injury time winner to give themselves the title. Can you imagine being in that away end, Joe.
Absolute scenes, I can imagine. A goal by Manor Solomon, of course, formerly of Fulham, at Tottenham. I think he's on loan at Leeds, and I think they'd want to keep hold of him for next season. I was watching another game. I didn't really know which game to watch, to be honest. There were so many ramifications. I was like, I think it was on Sheffield United Blackburn at one point. I was watching Derby Stoke to support you.
Thank you.
And this Leeds goal popped up, last minute winner, and the commentary was as if this was just like this goal didn't matter. But I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a massive goal.
That's the goal that's won them the league.
It's an absolutely massive goal, massive moment for Leeds. And it sounds like as well they've decided to stick with Daniel Farke for next season, which we had this chat last week about what they should do. They're going to give him a chance in the Premier League.
I know some people sort of might disagree, but that feels right to me. I know he's had a go in the Premier League and he's not done brilliantly well, but he said he was going to take his team up this year. He did. Not only has he taken them up, he's won the league. I just think he deserves a go. And yes, it might come back to haunt them, as you say, when it comes to October and the 5 points adrift already, but we'll see. He deserves a go, I think, Joe.
He does, absolutely. And Burnley, of course, going up as well. Did you see how Burnley celebrated their promotion this weekend?
No, I missed this, Joe.
They invited Natasha Bedingfield into the dressing room. I don't know if there's a connection there. Is she a big Burnley fan? Of course, she is a Christian. We play her on the UCB1 playlist, actually, Ed. So
the rest is still unwritten, Joe. And so maybe for Burnley, their future, their destiny in the Premier League is unwritten currently.
Do another Natasha Bedingfield song.
I think I'm about done.
But yeah, these are two teams going up. Massive summer transfer window. Both teams before have tried spending a lot of money to stay up, and it's not really worked. Leeds had a very good first season a few years ago. But yeah, we'll see how they do in the summer, who they bring in, and if it works.
Regardless of what happens, I think you see the teams that come up and do well are often not the teams that try to outplay the better teams. That's the key thing. So for me, it's whether you are, go out all guns blazing and attacking, or you become a team that sort of shuts up shop and is hard to beat. I think either is fine, either can work, but you just have to go in with a definite game plan, know your limits, know your lane, so to speak, and just go and do your thing well. Go and try and frustrate the bigger teams, however you do that. I'm really excited to see both of them. They've both played fantastic football this year, so it'll be great to see how they get on. Moving down into the playoff spots, Coventry and Bristol in the end holding out for the 5th and 6th place spots. I think that, again, feels right to me. Bristol have been there or thereabouts for most of the campaign. Coventry, of course, have looked like a much better team under Lampard, haven't they?
Frank Lampard's Coventry, thanks very much. Yeah,
exactly. And obviously above them, Sheffield United and Sunderland, who have really dipped in form towards the back end of the season, but they've been in and around the top 2 spots as well. Blackburn and Millwall put up a really good fight towards the back end of the season, but just missed out in the end on the final day. I think we should have a look at the relegation picture, Joe, because this is where so much of the drama was. Now, listen, as a Stoke fan, you'd think I'd be glued to the screen / my phone.
Yeah, it's a massive weekend. Every game was on the TV. As I was watching these games, I just thought, I wonder how Ed's doing. I messaged you, I said, squeaky bum, ? And I got no response. What were you doing, Ed?
Well, as I mentioned last week, the whole thing was kind of stressing me out. And so I opted to go and play golf. So myself and Dave Tanner from UCB and another colleague at UCB, Trevor, we went and played golf over that exact time. And I think it was somewhere around the 16th tee. I decided to have a quick look at my phone and was just delighted to see that Stoke had played out a 0-0 ball draw with Derby.
You don't mind it?
No, not at all. And obviously, going back and seeing the highlights of this one, there were not many, Joe. It was two teams who needed a draw, and it felt like, do you remember those World Cup games, like, Sweden against Denmark? Where, they both needed a draw to advance, and it was just a lot of passing the ball around.
A mutual agreement that we're fine with what's going on. We don't need to entertain anyone. Let's just see it out, and we're both happy.
None of us need to score here. That's the big thing. Let's just stay there.
Yeah, I think Derby have been one of the most interesting stories of this season. Obviously, John Eustace was at Blackburn doing really well. Obviously, Blackburn have just missed out on the playoffs this season. But they were doing great under John Eustace, but he made the decision to move down the league to Derby and kind of fighting this relegation battle, which career-wise, and we're going to go on to talk about what is a successful season, you kind of could argue that it has been a success. He's kind of saved them from relegation in what's been quite a difficult season for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the end of the day, he is, I mean, again, I've got a lot of time for John Eustace, ex-Stoke legend. He's a guy who really seems to just be a really solid guy, a really likeable chap to have leading your football team. And, you know, he had a job to do and did it really, you know. So you can't argue with results, Joe, can you?
You can't. And I was delighted because I watched the Blackburn game to see if they could make it. I was delighted to see Dean Whitehead on the sidelines as Blackburn. I think is he the assistant? Is he interim manager?
I think he's been assistant at about 7 different clubs now, you know, including Stoke as well.
And he looks exactly the same as he has throughout his whole footballing career.
Yeah, I do want to actually touch on another one of the results down at that end of the table. Preston, who needed a draw, got one away at Bristol City, but this was a big part of Bristol actually getting themselves into the playoffs. But Preston went 2-0 up in this one. A second goal coming on the hour mark from our friend Osmajic. You'll remember him from earlier in the season. Bristol coming back in the last 20 minutes. Crawley getting 2 goals to get a point, which was absolutely massive for them. It was one of those games where you were thinking, oh goodness, where is this going to go in the end? But Preston getting the draw they needed. Hull City as well getting a draw. They were away at Portsmouth. Great result for them. The team that lost really in this, because it was just going to be one team that lost out, because Plymouth were pretty much already down. And the team that unfortunately were at the sort of losing end of this raffle was Luton, who found themselves coming unstuck away at West Brom, scoring 3 goals away at West Brom.
You'd think that would do the job.
If you'd have said before the game, we're going to go away from home, we've got to win the game to be in with a chance, and you say, we score 3 goals, you'd take that, wouldn't you? You'd take that all day. But no, sadly losing 5-3 to West Brom. So can I just say, as a Stoke fan, I never thought I'd say this, I'm delighted with West Brom turning up to a game, and I'm delighted with Derby, happy to just let us knock the ball around at the back for 90 minutes. And Stoke are safe for another season, Joe.
Well, it's all gone very well for you, and another year without a Stoke Port Vale derby. So I can only imagine you're delighted about that.
Well, there was a lot of memes, I think, from Vale fans directed at Stoke fans over the weekend talking about open-top bus parades for us not getting relegated. And I think they were sort of, you know, calling us tin pot and all of that. And fair enough, they've had a great season.
I've seen the light shows you have. You've taken me along to a couple of light shows. I would describe them as exactly tin pot.
No comment. Should we move on to League One, Joe?
Yeah, let's do that. This felt like one of the less exciting leagues. You know, top spot already secured for Birmingham with a record points total. And then Wrexham also going up. So it was just the playoffs to play for, really, here, wasn't it, at the top end of the league?
Yeah, and even then, it was pretty much sewn up. It was all about that 6th place. So Stockport, Charlton and Wycombe were already in the playoffs. And it was all about the 6th spot. And it was between Leyton Orient and Reading. Leyton were away at Huddersfield Town. And Reading were at home to Barnsley. And essentially, Reading didn't turn up, and Leyton Orient did. Leyton Orient won 4-1 away at Huddersfield, Reading losing 4-2 at home to Barnsley. And at the bottom of League One, it was as it was before, so Crawley Town, Bristol Rovers, Cambridge United and Shrewsbury Town getting relegated to League Two, Joe.
Well, let's move on to League Two now, Ed, where there was a lot to play for, actually. I think one of my other favourite stories from this weekend was that fight for the 3rd automatic promotion place in League Two. This was kind of between Bradford and Walsall. Walsall were away at my beloved Crewe Alexandra, and Bradford were home to Fleetwood. Again, a case for Bradford of it. They just need to win, and they've got 3rd place. Now, straightforward enough, but that isn't the way in football, is it, Ed?
It never is. It never is.
It doesn't work like that. These games were both 0-0 to about the hour mark when Walsall went 1-0 ahead away at Crewe through a goal through George Hall. So, Bradford fans, it was squeaky bum time. Are they going to get this winner? And they left it right up until 90 plus 6 to get the winner to clinch.
Don't do that to your fans. Come on, think of blood pressure and all that.
A goal by Anthony Sarkovic. Now, at the end of this game, Ed, there were 3 pitch invasions. I was talking
that is too many. I mean, look, I don't want to say, because pitch invasions, there's a legal thing there, so I can't be condoning any of them.
Absolutely
but I can tell you that 3 is at least too many.
3 is far too many. I was chatting to my friend Claire, who's a Bradford fan, also a listener to this podcast, and she was away with some family but keeping up with the score. She saw the goal go in and there was a pitch invasion straight away. Last minute, obviously going up, delighted. The pitch was flooded. The announcer had to say, please get off the pitch. Because
get off. The game's not over.
The game's not over, that kind of thing. And then, I'm not too sure what happened here, but apparently there was rumours that the game had finished, so there was another pitch invasion. I'm not really sure what happened. There was a lot of confusion. I think there was some alerts on BBC Sport that the game had ended. I don't know what happened there. There was another pitch invasion. They had to clear the pitch again, and then finally the game ended. Bradford got the win. The pitch was invaded, and they're going to be in League One next year.
It's fantastic, isn't it? I don't know whether we're allowed to condone pitch invasions, but what we are allowed to condone is joy, is outpouring of joy.
You're allowed to be very happy and within reason.
You know what? Yeah. Let's touch briefly on the playoff picture in League Two, where the only sort of point of interest really was actually the final spot, the 7th spot, where Chesterfield managed to get in on the final day. It was between them and Salford City, and Salford could only manage a 2-2 draw away at Carlisle. Chesterfield managed to get a winner away against Accrington Stanley and win 1-0. Will Grigg, remember him, scoring the only goal in that one.
Famously on fire a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Chesterfield managing to get into the playoffs there. Carlisle already down, but managing to stop Salford getting into the playoffs. So again, having an impact on that one. But yes, Carlisle already down with Morecambe. Should we talk about the Premier League, Joe?
Yeah, I guess we should probably touch on it. Like we say, a lot of it is wrapped up already. I think the only interesting area at the moment now is that race for Europe. Who's going to get the top 5 Champions League spaces? Who's going to get into the Europa League? And if Man City win the FA Cup final, that 8th place will then be Europa Conference League place. So there's a lot of teams in and around that area.
Without going too hard into the specific games, I think it'd actually be more important for us to look at the season for these teams, really, and look at whether we think they've had a good season or not, because like you said, we can already tell you whether they've had a good or a bad or indifferent season. United losing 4-3 away at Brentford. I mean, again, given United's form this season, that's not particularly out of character, was it, for them? Draws for Brighton against Newcastle and West Ham against Tottenham. Again, that's the kind of game that Spurs would have traditionally really gone for. And again, floundering a little bit. Chelsea beating Liverpool. Of course, Chelsea, very much was something to play for. Liverpool, not
very much not. Yeah.
What did you make of that one quickly, Joe?
Well, yeah, I think it was one of those that clearly the Liverpool players, without going into too much detail, have probably celebrated quite a lot this week. And maybe spent less time on the training ground. But I think you still want to see your team go out there and play well. You want to see them try. And although Slot made a few changes, I think you would have liked to have seen them try a bit harder, I think, Ed. They missed a lot of chances. Nunez doing what he does best. And Salah missed a few chances as well. But I think we're at this interesting point of the season now where there's 3 teams that are still in Europe. I'm not counting Chelsea because I think it's pretty nailed on. They should probably win the Europa Conference League. But if you think of Manchester United and you think of Spurs, you also think of Arsenal. You got 3 teams here who are in Europe in a semi-final. They've got their second leg to come, and they've almost thrown away the league. They don't really care anymore. They're playing very weak teams. And I think if you're a fan, you still want to see your team try hard in the league, because you could find yourself, if you are Manchester United, you're Tottenham, you could find yourself where your team could lose a European final and finish 16th in the Premier League, and that is an absolute disaster.
Let's focus on Manchester United and Tottenham. I think for teams who can comfortably say we have not had a good season this year, ignoring the 3 relegated sides, because I think that goes without saying. But I think particularly Manchester United and Tottenham, neither of those sides are over 40 points at this stage. Now, when teams come up, they always talk about 40 points being the minimum. Like, you need 40 points to stay in the league. And again, you spoke about it last episode, Joe, is that actually the likes of West Ham, Tottenham and Manchester United, Everton I'll include in that as well, have had the kind of seasons where they should traditionally have been worried, and it's only because of the real abject failures of the 3 teams that have come up that they're not looking over their shoulder right now.
Yeah.
United and Spurs should be in a relegation scrap, and that feels insane, doesn't it? So we have to say, regardless of whether they're ending up winning the Europa League and getting into the Champions League very much via the back door, this has been a terrible season for both of them.
Yeah, it's absolutely unthinkable that these 2 teams, with the amount of money they have, the squads they have, the managers they have, to not have reached the 40-point mark, to be in danger of never reaching it this season, is absolutely unthinkable. And I think a Europa League win for either of these teams is certainly papering over the cracks. It's obviously going to get them a lot of money, Champions League football next season, but neither of these teams are ready for Champions League football at all. And I think there's an interesting conversation here, actually, that this is the first season in the Europa League that Champions League teams haven't come down to the Europa League. So that means the standard is actually quite a bit lower. I think I saw something that if it had happened this season, you'd have teams like AC Milan, you'd have Juventus, you'd have a whole host of teams that I don't think United or Tottenham would stand a chance against in the Europa League. But it just so happens that this season that's not happened. They've got to the final. It's a chance to win a trophy, quite a big trophy. I think it would be particularly quite funny if Tottenham win the title, because Ange just had this whole thing of, I always win a trophy in my second season. All year we've been saying that's absolute nonsense, and it could happen.
It could, and actually.
That would be really funny.
I think it would be good to look at the sort of, I suppose, the next lot of sides. And I don't just want to go up the table, but I think I would say the what-if season, where it's been okay, but it feels like there's been a real missed opportunity, or there's been a sort of an opportunity squandered. I would personally put the likes of Crystal Palace and Brentford in that category, teams that at different ends of the season have shown real promise, and actually you just think, if we could have stitched this together for the whole thing, this could have been really something quite special. Like, we forget how good Brentford were at the start of the year. They were on fire, unplayable at home, particularly in the first minute of games. And Palace have looked really, really solid as well, but just not had that consistency to make it a campaign to remember.
It's so much about consistency. And I think if you think of these individual teams, Crystal Palace, Brentford, Bournemouth, Fulham, you kind of have to think, and you're like, they've had a good season. Crystal Palace, you'd think on the surface they've had a good season. They're always going to finish 12th every single season. And it's just about consistency. It's about running out of steam, having squads that can go the distance. I think the more competition there is, almost these teams as well have had quite good runs in cup competitions, whether that's a Carabao or the FA Cup. And you almost think you have to kind of make this decision, are we going to go for it in the cup and kind of suffer in the league, or are we just going to focus on the league? And clubs don't really have the squads to do both.
I think the next sort of lot of teams that I'd say is the close but no cigar category. You know, teams that have really stepped up but maybe have just missed out. I would say essentially Nottingham Forest and Villa are the 2 big ones in that category. You know, they've been in and around Champions League spots, particularly Forest. They're in 6th place now, and how long they were sort of in 2nd and 3rd and very much up there. We were talking about them being in a title race at one point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this absolutely shows how hard the Premier League actually is. For so long, they've been quite comfortably 3rd. You know, it's always been Liverpool, Arsenal at the top, kind of undoubtedly the two best teams in the league. And then Forest have been there with quite the cushion. And just this last few weeks, just as they attack in the 101st minute, Ed, might be able to bring some live reaction to a late winner. Maybe not. But it just seems a little bit like, again, they've run out of steam. I think Villa's a really interesting topic here. Again, you'd say they've had a good season. If you look at on paper, Aston Villa are on course to finish outside the top 5 and not win a single trophy. And you have to say, feels a bit like a letdown, considering where they've been in the FA Cup. They got to the semi-final. Where they got to in the Champions League, they just miss out to arguably the best team in Europe in PSG. In the league, they've had such a good season, but they seem to be missing out to some better teams. And on paper, looks like a failure. But I'd say they've had quite a good season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. It's very much a matter of perspective, isn't it? And it's the same with Forest, is you look at the way that their season has sort of crumpled a little bit. But again, they're still right up there. A couple of great results in the last few games, and they could get themselves a Champions League spot, and it feels like what they deserved. And so you don't sort of want to go, oh yeah, but if we don't make it, it's not been a great season. Because actually, again, looking at from the beginning of the year, you would absolutely take this if you were a Nottingham Forest fan all day. But that's the thing. It's the thing with success. You smell it and all of a sudden you want more of it, don't you? And I think it comes down to what we sort of want to touch on a little bit, moving away from the football, is how do you define success? And so much of it, I think, is down to perspective, isn't it? You know, because it's all about the goals that you set yourself. It's all about what measure of success you have. Is it that you haven't achieved a specific points total or haven't achieved whatever it might be? Or is it just that you want to say, you know what, like, we've given it our all this year? Do you know what I mean? Do you think there's a sort of a thing of like applying this to everyday life and about like how we can define success in our own lives?
I do. I think there's a phrase that we use in football quite a lot. You just used it there when it comes to Nottingham Forest, of at the start of the season, if you told me that this would happen, I would be happy. And I think that's a phrase that we could apply to our everyday life. If you told me 10 years ago that I was going to have this job, I was going to have this house, I was going to have this car, whatever that is, it doesn't have to be a materialistic thing. I know that I've just touched on 3 things there that seem quite materialistic. It could be that I was going to have this friendship group, I was going to have this particular relationship, I was going to have whatever this is. And we recognise as Christians that these are things that God has given us. If you told me 10 years ago that I was going to have this, would I be happy? Probably yes.
And I think like so much of it as well, you're talking about contentment as well, and some of it is never going to translate to professional sports, because you know you're talking about athletes who are, even the lowest Premier League player is a born winner just by being there. These are not people who accept second place. They accept only the very best and strive for perfection in everything they do, you know. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. But I think you're right. Some of the most content people I know are people who maybe don't have everything that they want. They don't have the relationship or the marriage that they wish they had, or they don't have the job, the career they wish they could have. Or maybe they're not in the home they want to be in, but actually they've managed to cultivate a sense of contentment around their lives that sort of goes beyond all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of being a Christian as well, is recognising what you have in your life that is good, what you have in your life that God has blessed you with. And I think as humans, it's so natural for us to be looking for that next thing. Maybe that's the next career progression, maybe that's moving areas, whatever that is. And it's good just to take stock sometimes, I think. I'm trying really hard at the moment to be more in the moment, not just in day-to-day life, but where I am in my life right now. Let's enjoy this season that you're in, because you're never going to be in this season again. And if you're constantly looking ahead, you're not going to see how God is using you in the day-to-day life, I guess. So I think contentment plays a really big part in this whole conversation about defining success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all as fans look at our team wherever we are, and we can look back likely in our sort of recent or not so recent history and go, I remember when it was like this. And you know what, we might be mid-table now, but at least we're not scrapping relegation. At least we're not 3 divisions below in some cases.
Yeah.
And actually that you can take a lot of perspective, can't you, from thinking like that?
Yeah, and I think there's something in football that really frustrates me, and that's this thing of recency bias. And almost like the last thing that happens is the thing that defines you as a team. And I think, again, that can be applied to life, to look at the bigger picture and to have perspective of where you are in life and not focus on that small thing that might be getting you down. And I think there's a lot that the Bible says about this kind of thing.
Yes, and Jordan Williams, who is the chaplain at Torquay United, he's also the senior leader at Riviera Life Church in Torquay, had a chat with producer Anthony. He is somebody who surely knows more than we do about this sort of stuff.
Jordan Williams, chaplain at Torquay United, thank you so much for being here on the Big Man Up Top podcast. It has been quite the season for Torquay United this year. Just missing out on those automatic promotion spots and then losing out in the semi-finals of the playoffs. But how would you define success for Torquay this year, seeing as how you got so near but were just that one step away?
I think when we think about success, we can go to quite a kind of clear-cut, almost brutal definition, that if you win something, you're successful, and if you don't win something, you're a failure. That's kind of the way in which the world, and particularly sport, presents success. And if we have that as our definition of success, then we look across the football pyramid and we look across the community of sport, and we see that actually the majority of teams and people are failures, if that's our definition of success. And so we have to look at success a little bit more as in like a relative term to each individual team. 15 months ago, Torquay United were put into administration under an old leadership and old ownership. And we were faced with the prospect of our football team, one of the centres of our community, going bust, disappearing, over a 100-year history, just vanishing. We went through an incredible process where some incredible local business people then took on the club, started literally from scratch. New manager, new staff. We had one player on the books at the beginning of last season. And then we went through the ordeal of a football season, the highs and lows. And to miss out on automatic promotion by 2 goals, like you can't really get a more disappointing end to the season. And I was there away at Hemel when we won 4-1 and 2 more goals would have done it for us. And I was there on Saturday then where you pick yourself up again and you think, all right, come on, let's go in the playoffs. And 5,700 fans packed out our little stadium and it was an incredible atmosphere. And to lose again in the playoffs, it's gutting. Of course it is. We're football fans. We want to win. We want to get the promotions. And we could deem that as an unsuccessful season. We could look at it as an unsuccessful time. Or we can reflect on the journey the club's been on over the last 14, 15 months and realise, actually, we've been a successful club this year. The fact that we're still here, the fact that we went so close, the fact that we've galvanised the community, the fact that we've seen such a turnaround at the football club, that is success. So as I look back on this season, we can look back and just look at the facts and say, well, we missed out on promotion. And then, on paper, we were the second best team in the league. So we should have won the playoffs and we didn't, and that's a failure, but it's not, because we look a bigger picture and realise that actually it's the turning of a tide for our football club, and where we're going to be this time next year and in 5 years and in 10 years is far better than when we've been in the last few years because of the change of culture and the change of trajectory of our football club. So success, yes, it has been a successful season. Would it have been lovely to get a promotion? Oh, of course it would have been. Any football fan that says otherwise is lying. Of course we want that trophy. We want that moment of just celebration, but it will come. I have full belief it will come. But yeah, so overall, a successful season, and with the looking ahead to even more successful seasons to come. But I think it's interesting to think about what is our measure of success, because if we only ever think about success as being the ones on top or winning something, then we set ourselves up to feel like failures a lot of the time, where actually we have to look at much more individual cases around success and what is successful for each person, each club, each community. But yeah, really great question.
Yeah, that's so good that you're still able to put a positive spin on the season. So what would you say it means to be successful in life then, just in general?
I think it's a question that people have probably asked for generations. I think it will probably be still asked for generations to come. This pursuit of success and to run away from that feeling of failure. Let's be honest, none of us like to feel failure. None of us want to be labeled or branded as a failure. And I think if you asked every individual, what does success mean to you, you'd probably get a different answer every single time. For me, it's far less about the things I can gather or the things I can do. It's less about the earthly impact I can have, but actually the question I ask is, am I having an eternal impact? Am I impacting things and people and places that will have an eternal difference that is made? If we seek that and search for that, I think we can find success. I think if we search for earthly pleasure, earthly promotions, earthly gain, we will only find momentary success, because there's always something newer, faster, bigger, better. There's always another thing to go for. There's always more to get. There's always somebody else as well who's got more than you. And if we search for and chase after this earthly success that is shallow, we live a life of comparison. We live a life comparing our lack to somebody else's plenty. We'll compare our stuff to somebody else's stuff, and we'll always live with a dissatisfaction when we search for that kind of success. So I think true success in life is when we do things and have an impact that doesn't just stop when we leave this earth, but leaves a legacy, has an eternal impact, changes hearts and minds, and see something significant happen, rather than just building something of materialism, building something earthly, building something that disappears very, very quickly. So for me, that would be my search for success. Am I having an impact that is eternal? I think when I was a bit younger, you chase moments, and you chase highs and you chase excitement, but actually sometimes you're just chasing hype. And I think I've realized as I've got a little bit older, and I've still got a long way to go, that actually it's kind of the smaller things, the quieter things, the moments of peace that you just realize that, hey, life's good, and this is where success is.
Yes, of course. And as we think about eternity, we also think about just how God looks at us and how he defines success. How do you think we can do better to see how God sees us and follow his measure of success in our lives?
I think it's always the opposite of what the world will tell us success is. We have this incredible understanding that when we follow Jesus, we become part of the kingdom of God. We are under his rule, his reign, his authority, his kingship. And we are in this world, but not of this world. We are in the kingdom of God. We are citizens of the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven. And that is always countercultural to what we experience on this earth. On this earth, what we see as success is fame. People chasing fame, people desiring fame, their moments of fame. But that comes and goes very, very quickly. It doesn't last. But actually, I believe what the definition of success that God has is faithfulness. So those words in the scripture that says, well done, good and faithful servant. Those are the words that, man, I long to hear when I stand before him one day, just before I enter into the promise of heaven. And if that is the words God speaks, and his desire is to speak those words over people, well done, good and faithful servant, surely faithfulness is the definition of success then. And I'm really pleased about that, because hey, I don't know, one day I might be famous, I doubt it. But if you're famous, you have to live up to an expectation, a measure of people that is impossible. And if you're famous, you get a moment, but somebody else will have their moment, and then you get put on the shelf and forgotten about. But faithfulness is something absolutely I can do. I can live a faithful life, not because I'm good or I have ability, but because I have been saved by Jesus Christ, and I now come to him in my weakness, and he makes me strong, and he guides me and helps me to live the faithful life that God has designed me to live and desires me to live. Also, let's break it down. We can decide, how do I be faithful today? How do I be faithful tomorrow? How do I be faithful this week? How do I be faithful with the things God has given me? How do I be faithful in the message of the gospel and sharing the message of the gospel with people around me? And that then is leading me, I pray and hope, to a successful life. I think when it comes to how do we measure that in our lives, we put false measures on ourselves. We put false measures on each other. And I want to live measured up to what God has called me to do and who God has called me to be, rather than the expectations of people around me. He looks at me through the righteousness of Jesus Christ. He doesn't look at me through my weaknesses. He looks at me through that incredible sacrifice.
That is great. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us on the Big Man Up Top this week.
Okay, Joe, it's time for the quiz again. It's Bible Ballers. Have you had any more thoughts on this one?
I think I've got it, Ed.
You think you've got it?
Yeah. Why don't you just read the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll read the question again. So it was, which former Wigan and Fulham midfielder, upon signing for Hull City, was presented with a contract containing a misprinted higher salary than originally agreed, which he signed anyway?
Wigan, Fulham and Hull. Now, players that have played for all those teams, I'm quite confident in thinking that Jimmy Bullard has played for all of those teams. He seems like the kind of guy that would just sign a contract and not mention the amount of money on there. I think you're trying to play a little trick on me with the whole James thing, obviously after last week's embarrassment for you. So I'm going to lock in Jimmy Bullard, please.
Jimmy Bullard, the purveyor of fine goal celebrations, is correct, Joe. Well done. Yes, Jimmy Bullard. James Bullard.
Is that his actual name?
Yeah, when he signed for Hull, he'd agreed 40 grand a week with them, and they put the contract in front of him and it said 55 grand. So it's quite a considerable amount different. And apparently he was like, yeah. And so I thought that story summed Jimmy Bullard up in the sense that, look, I'm not saying he's immoral. He's a bit cheeky though, isn't he, Joe? He's a bit of a mischief maker.
A cheeky chappy.
But that's all we've got time for, Joe, this week.
Oh, well, it's been an absolute joy, Ed.
It's been lovely, hasn't it? Well, thank you for listening to The Big Man Up Top. And if you want to get in touch with the show, please do ping us an email to podcasts@ucb.co.uk. Tell us how you define success. I think we'd love to hear your thoughts on that one. But yes, please follow, subscribe, give us all the good reviews, that sort of stuff. This will help us to get the word out, and definitely tell your friends. Also, a huge thank you to producer Anthony for all his hard work, especially us making him work at 9 o'clock on a bank holiday evening. We're very grateful, Anthony. There will be a new episode next Tuesday, Joe, won't there?
There will. I'll see you then, Ed.
See you next week.